Hi everybody, today is February 5th and welcome to episode 11 of the Current Status Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, I'm Melissa Palmer, and you can find me on Twitter at VMiss33.
And I'm Pumla Schmidt. You can find me on Twitter as Exchange Goddess.
And I am Teresa Miller. You can find me on Twitter at 24/7ITConnect.
And tonight, we have our featured guest as always. We have Eric Wright, also known as the Disco Posse on the Twitters. Eric, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little about yourself?
Oh boy, well, it's fun to be here. This is really cool. Like I said, I've usually used to hosting these things as a virtual design master type of guy. But yeah, my name is Eric Wright. I am at Disco Posse on Twitter. I'm an independent blogger at discoposse.com, and I also am a principal solutions engineer and technology evangelist for a little company called VMturbo. They're not so little anymore, but that's my daytime gig. And then, of course, by nighttime, I sit in on podcasts and do lots of OpenStack stuff.
So speaking of OpenStack, which is going to be our topic for the evening, Eric, can you kind of tell us what OpenStack is?
Well, the OpenStack question is always a good one, and this is actually what I get all the time. So the official definition is that OpenStack is a ubiquitous cloud platform. It's an open source computing platform. It's mostly designed to be able to be used in both private and public cloud environments. And the good thing is that it's been around for about I guess it's been 5 years now. It's the cool thing about OpenStack is that it is completely open source. It was born of Rackspace and NASA, which is cool because anything involving NASA is extra cool.
It is. I agree.
And I will also agree with that.
The big reason why OpenStack is interesting to a lot of folks, especially now, is that it's started to gain a little bit of speed around adoption. Cloud platforms in general are something we've been talking about for a while. Many years ago, people were always like, public cloud, that's the way to go. If you're going to go with the cloud, the right way to do it is always public cloud. That was the idea, is to be able to burst into an elastic environment. This was the direction everything was designed to go. Amazon had created this incredible idea of being able to have these, infinite, or at least theoretically infinite to any company, resources that they could burst out into on a public environment. Pay by the hour, pay by the minute, use what you need, throw it away when you're done, and that was the whole consumption model. So the idea was that everybody was going to jump on board and do public cloud infrastructure, except there was a problem. A lot of people didn't like the idea of public clouds. Public clouds meant that you were turning over your data into a public environment. There was potential for security concerns. There's regulatory stuff around public clouds. So everybody said, well, let's do private clouds. And there was this neat little thing called vClouds. VMware has been touting.
Wait, what's VMware?
Oh yeah, sorry.
Just kidding. Keep talking.
So VMware had been touting vCloud as their solution to be able to build private clouds. Now I don't know who else here has been lucky enough to make a run at installing vCloud, but early iterations of vCloud were pretty rough to install. People were used to a Wintel environment. They weren't comfortable running Linux. They weren't comfortable with the installation process, and then architecting it, configuring it. Ultimately, private clouds were rough. There weren't that many options. Then along came OpenStack. It spawned a lot of different alternatives. There's CloudStack. That was a big one from the Apache project. But ultimately, OpenStack is kind of winning out. Where they were smart was they actually built something in a foundation. The idea was to build a foundation to create governance and to help to guide and align the development of the projects. And now they're called programs. They keep changing that every once in a while. So that they could help to say, if this is the right direction to go. They use a good methodology as far as the way they do their development practices, their testing practices, and then they have a whole training infrastructure around it as well. They've got lots of companies that are coming on board. Right now, I think there's 180 contributing companies into OpenStack, which is very, very cool. And then on the people side, there's literally thousands of developers that are contributing public code.
So if I have a traditional, just plain up virtualized environment as it stands today, and I want to move towards an OpenStack model, what do? I just migrate all my VMs to OpenStack and I'm good to go, or is there other stuff that has to happen too?
There's a couple of different tactics you can take. One, one common thing is, depending on what your hypervisor is today, you can actually just integrate OpenStack with whatever you're running today.
Oh, really?
I wonder how you can do that. Yeah, so VMware, of course, is probably the most famous right now for having done this, because if anybody was watching earlier this week, there was a couple of little things that got announced on Monday, Tuesday, whatever the second was, from Groundhog Day. And one of them was the long talked about VO, or VMware Integrated OpenStack. But ultimately, OpenStack is a platform, and it allows you to control compute resources, storage resources, and network resources. And the reason why they're the resources is because it doesn't care what they are. You're running Cisco for networking, no problem. We'll plug into Neutron with a Cisco driver. You're running HP for networking, not a problem. Plug in the driver. You're running whatever company for storage. Obviously there's dozens and dozens of companies that are out there. Not a problem. We'll just plug in the driver for that appropriate piece of hardware or that software storage environment, and you can run whatever you want. And the same is true on the compute side. So if you're a VMware shop, you could ultimately just spin up an OpenStack environment, use the native VMware driver, or if you're now one of the, as they say, up to 1,000 customers that are going to be running VO, they just run OpenStack as the provisioning platform and the self-service dashboard, and they run the hypervisor as VMware. You can connect it directly to vCenter or to you can connect to vCenter or directly to an ESXi instance as well. The real win is to connect it to vCenter, because then all of the other features that have been around for years with VMware are still there. So you get the HA capability, the DRS, you get all of those cool new features, but you actually use this provisioning platform, which is a web-based self-service using the Horizon dashboard.
Cool. So where does all the security lie? Within this?
Sorry, we had an echo there, but just you talk about maturity? Yeah, so the biggest problem they've got right now is, while it's 5 years old, and I count it in dog years, right? Because 5 years is a long time in software, and it's come a long way. Whereas originally there was 2 programs that were in the first iteration. Now there's I can't remember the exact number, but it's
13,
like 9.
I think.
Oh God, even there you go. See, where do they come from? They're like kids; they just keep coming. So the problem with the maturity around it is mostly around the enterprise side, and I call it capital E enterprise. There's enterprise meaning big, which is companies like Rackspace. I'd say you could call Rackspace enterprise. They're a massive provider of OpenStack resources in their public cloud, and that's what's been driving it. Obviously, they kind of helped build it, so that was a big thing. But a lot of traditional companies, the big blue type of companies, banks and whatnot, that they're used to VMwares and Microsoft Hyper-V environments, they may be not quite as comfortable with something that's only been around for 4 or 5 years. And one of the challenges with the enterprise stuff is it's not built to be an enterprise product. It's not built to be super high availability. It's not meant to be something that you put a workload up and it never gets rebooted. It's built around the public cloud concepts, which include the old classic pets versus cattle thing. Pretty sure that Randy Bias was the one that came up with that one originally. But the idea that in a public environment or a scale-out web development environment, you just create resources that can be just taken out. You should have a scale-out application that won't care if half of it just disappears. Well, guess what? We've got lots of enterprise companies that are running, whatever their web product is or whatever their standalone accounting package is. They can't just have it suddenly just power off and get rebooted onto a new host. That's why vMotions were very cool. Storage vMotions upped the game on VMware's side. So VMware kind of owns that whole enterprise arena, And there's a lot of maturity around there. We're at 6.0 now, so we've seen it for quite a few years. OpenStack is getting there, though. There's a ton of great developments, and if you just look at the size of the community around it, it's pretty incredible to see.
So if I'm an organization and I'm not sure if OpenStack is for me, but I want to take a look at it, what is the best way to go about that?
Here's the fun part. I'm going to write a blog about it hopefully in a couple of days, and it's what I call the how to draw an owl. So have you ever seen those things? And I tweeted the other day, it was kind of a joke that just says how to draw an owl. First, draw 2 circles. Then finish the owl. And the next one is like this perfect, amazingly drawn owl. And you're like, how did you get from step 1 to 2? It's the Martha Stewart pre-baked oven. It's the turducken. It's all these things that you go on to Pinterest and you say like, oh, you can make little snowman cupcakes. And then you show the picture of what you actually produced, and you're like, oh, horrible. The same thing kind of happens when people start to dabble in OpenStack. They'll say, oh, well, good, I'm going to try OpenStack. And it's not quite as simple to just try it. You have to think about how to deploy it. There's a lot of good package distributions. DevStack is probably the most popular one for people just wanting to kick the tires on it. So you can use the DevStack release, and you can just spin one up. They're super easy to create. It has a fully orchestrated framework that's wrapped around it. You can also go with private cloud editions, which I like. Rackspace has one, which is very cool. Mirantis is another huge company that's built their whole environment around supporting OpenStack. And they just have a fully provisioned private cloud platform. You just load the ISO, you tell it where to deploy, zang zoom, life is good. Red Hat has a similar offering. Theirs is commercial, so you actually have to license it. And then, of course, there's the classic, I always forget how to actually refer to it, but Canonical's iteration of OpenStack is, a lot of people call it the vanilla OpenStack, but this is just basically OpenStack core, run it on top of Ubuntu. And right there, that's what, 5, 6 different ways you can run OpenStack,
Yep.
which is part of the problem. How do I run OpenStack? That's a problem. How do I learn, how to run OpenStack? That's also a big problem. There's a lot of good educational resources, but there's also a lack of, getting from the 2 circles to the fully drawn owl, and that's where I'm trying to put a lot of focus on. I've done some stuff with Pluralsight, so I have a course on there called Introduction to OpenStack, which is now actually 2 versions of OpenStack old, but the core of it is still valid, which is cool. But then when you get beyond this, we have to get to the why. Why would you want to run OpenStack? And OpenStack is about how you do things, not what you're doing. It's designed around better deployment practices, agile development practices, and like sort of DevOps. There you go. I said DevOps. I had to get that in once at least. But it's the idea of being able to be fully self-service. And if your company isn't quite ready for self-service today, if you try and fire up OpenStack, they may not really get what it is that you're doing. That's another big barrier that's going on.
So Eric, are you saying that any Joe Schmo really shouldn't do this without much thought?
Yeah, it's
like a junior admin.
Yeah, that's it, and it's tough to say that, right? I mean, I do this a lot. I've built standalone environments. I've worked with the folks at Rackspace, Cody Bunch, and a bunch of other folks. Trevor Roberts, Trevor's over at, I think he's at Cisco now. We ran something called Couch to OpenStack, and it was the idea of taking somebody who had no previous experience. We'll spin up an environment on VirtualBox with Vagrant, so it's super easy to launch. And we're going to walk through in the V Brown Bag series on how to do it. And we had good luck with people coming on board, but what we found was even with the Couch to OpenStack, we got to OpenStack pretty fast. And a lot of people were still sitting on the couch going, I don't think I'm ready yet. So that's where it's tough, because as a junior admin, ESXi takes how long to install? 14 minutes if you go away from your desk and use the washroom. So it's a lot different. Deploying OpenStack, there's a lot more care and feeding involved.
It's funny you mentioned couch to OpenStack, because that's actually how I started with OpenStack, why that V Brown Bag series was going. I just kind of put it on my laptop and was like, all right, let's see what this is all about. And that's one of the cool things about OpenStack. You can just install it on your laptop in some virtual machines and start kicking the tires on it. But yeah, there's a little bit of a learning curve if you're kind of trying to build it from scratch. That's where I think a lot of the distributions come in, and the new VMware integrated OpenStack is supposed to be really simple to deploy. And what's even better is they don't charge you, it's free, so they're not going to charge you support fees and maintenance fees unless you want to. So, you can put it in the lab, start kicking around, but you don't have to pay for support until you go production if you decide it's right for your organization.
Yeah, VMware is really neat, and I was pretty happy about what they were doing. When they came in and they became part of the foundation, I guess it's like a year and a half or almost 2 years ago now, there was a lot of people that were sort of irked around the idea because they thought, clearly they have a commercial interest in participating in OpenStack. It was all around feeding NSX, which was Nicira, brand new acquisition at the time. But VMware was smart. They actually have a dedicated pool of developers that just work on the OpenStack projects, so that's really cool how they do that, and they've stayed in that model of maintaining pure open source developers, and they feed a ton of stuff upstream. Dan Wendland, who came in from the Nicira acquisition, Dan's like super cool. I think he was a program team lead for Neutron back in the day as well. So they were really aggressive on being able to maintain that, and then the idea of spinning it up and then backing it with VMware platforms, it's kind of the best of both worlds. So if you're a pure VMware shop, you've got no reason why you wouldn't just fire up a VO instance and just see how it goes, because you're not changing your infrastructure whatsoever. You're just adding a new way to consume that service through the self-service model.
Mm-hmm.
We always have this thing of, like I try and talk about what the value of OpenStack is, and it's tough. We have the same conversations over and over again with good reason, because there's always a junior crowd. It's like I said, there's always a grade 9 class, right? There's always a brand new set of folks who are still not sure what's going on, and you show them the ropes, and then you watch them 4 years later, and they're like, I remember when you were my teacher, you were awesome, and now I'm super comfortable. But there's another batch that's going to do that. So cloud methodologies are that way. There's continuously a fresh class of people who are not used to that type of management of infrastructure, and that's where VMware is going to be good, that they can still, you've got your traditional VMware platform, your entire working set, all your processes, all your automation stuff you built around it, still working. Then let's just try it over here. If it doesn't take, no big deal, right? You still got all your VMware stuff. Ultimately, it's better for the rest of us too, because anybody that wants to run OpenStack, now it kind of builds a little bit of, enterprise. There's that big E enterprise credibility around it. So it's kind of cool that way.
Well, and it sounds like, too, like if you have a lab at home or even a lab at work, there's not really much stopping you from getting your feet wet in it and trying it out and see what benefits your enterprise could, gain from having OpenStack as part of its strategy.
Yeah, and the good thing is there's a ton of people that are involved, and my classic thing, my tagline on my website is people, process, technology. And I found it after the fact. I got to give props to Colin McNamara, because Colin actually has the exact same tagline. And I felt like I stole it from him, but I'm like, no, it's a methodology. It's a classic thing. It's like Six Sigma type of stuff, right? So people, process, technology is in that order for a reason, because it's about finding people, figuring out what kind of processes they do, or processes for my American friends, and then technology is third. Like, technology is a way to enable people and process. So that's what's cool. When I look at the people that are wrapped around the OpenStack ecosystem, it's very cool. Everybody's very open, literally, open source, right? It's an open community. It's a huge community too. There's training resources that are completely free. If you go to openstack.org/training, and you can see there's a lot of free resources. There's corporate training that's available. They talked about how to get into developments. You've got a lot of our blogosphere. Our bloggers are getting heavily involved and starting to do this. It's cool because I remember 2 years ago, people were like, "Oh, why are you working on OpenStack? That's like this weird side hobby." It just seemed like a science experiment for me to be doing this, and I felt like I was lagging behind some of the folks that were really early adopters. And then last year, they're like, "Oh, yeah, seems you're still doing that OpenStack thing. That science project seems to be really kind of hanging on." And then in our virtual design master, we decided to twist things up a little bit, and we added OpenStack into the actual challenge. Not only did we do that, but we did OpenStack backed by VMware. So we like to say that we were VO hipsters. We did VMware integrated OpenStack before it was cool.
Yeah.
And in the course of 3 days, we took people that had never touched OpenStack, and they actually deployed it with 2 hypervisors and fully self-service front end, which is very, very cool. But again, they were folks that are maybe not a senior level of administrator, so they were a bit more comfortable with tackling some new technology. So again, as that new class comes in all the time, it's good that we can give them more options. I think in universities now, you're going to see more and more folks are getting it in university and moving their way up, which is kind of how a lot of development stuff comes in. The enterprise isn't where it starts. That's just where it eventually becomes normal. But it happens in the startups, it happens in the universities, it happens in all of these smaller areas, and it kind of propagates upwards until enterprise kind of buys into it.
Okay, so let's say I'm not so much a junior admin anymore. I've been running OpenStack on my laptop. I've gotten pretty comfortable with it. I have a strong kind of virtualization background. And I want to put together a little business case to go to my manager and say, hey, I need a little bit of hardware to test this out. What are kind of my 2 quick wins that I can say I'm going to use OpenStack to make us better doing this, to kind of start building my case and proving the value in my organization?
The big win is, it's free, right? We can always start with free. That's my free kittens thing. That's
there's no such thing as a free kitten.
There's no such thing. They're free when you get them, but they get really complainy if you don't feed them. So there is some after purchase costs that wrap around it. There is the idea that it is free. It's got a massive community around it, but the real win is it's widely supported, which is cool. It spins up on existing hardware, easy to get in and running on your existing platform. And it's what it's going to enable you to do. It's a true multi-tenant environment right out of the gate. It's super easy to spin up multiple tenants. You can adapt it to what your network infrastructure is. It will adapt to whatever your compute platform is. If you want to run KVM, which is probably one of the most common, I think that's the #1 hypervisor across the board on OpenStack. But you could run, OpenStack on Docker, as the driver. You could run OpenStack on KVM, on Xen, on Hyper-V, and of course on VMware ESXi. So that's the big thing. Is just about I'm going to run this. I can put some workloads into it. And then you can easily spin them up, tear them down, and you can turn your developers loose in there. And that's where it's a real great platform. It's really meant for enabling good development practices. You want to spin up a dev environment? No problem. Have at it, son. Go for it. And they can spin it up in their own tenant. It doesn't conflict with anything else. There's security baked in. Again, when you build your vCloud environments, there's all of these post-installation steps to create your first VDC, create your management, VDC, all these different, best practices you had to do. With OpenStack, once you spin it up, all of that stuff is built in. The ability to carve off a new tenant, the ability to set security on it. There's some challenges around getting the identity stuff connected. If you've got Active Directory, there's a little bit of yak shaving involved sometimes to get it. But as a pure standalone lab environment, it's super easy to spin up. And again, just go to a company that's got a pre-baked deployment. Just use that, and then that gives you the buy-in on the capital E enterprise side, where you say, yeah, we're using Red Hat, and Red Hat can fully support us. Oh, okay, no problem. That'll make them happier. Or like I said, now VMware is going to have that nifty little SKU, and they're going to have some support wrapped around it.
All right, so let's switch gears a little bit to some of the things that have happened in tech this week. I think Agent P mentioned that Microsoft bought another company. She's muted because we had some Google hates us tonight. Google just hates us so much tonight. So anyway,
Okay,
somebody that
it's okay. We can talk about it a little bit if she doesn't
she's
want
gonna
to
make faces at us.
unmute. So they acquired a company called Sunrise. They're laughing. That's awesome. And it's for expansion of calendaring.
Right. So
and I think that
this is a company that does iOS and Android apps. Like, this is the best iOS Android calendar app. iOS and Android, not Windows Phone. Just saying. iOS and Android. Just
yeah.
That's the irony of it all, right?
Yeah, cross-platform, which I think is really interesting because from a support perspective on the Exchange side, there's a lot of corruption that comes from meetings that are accepted and declined on various devices. And so I'm hoping that out of this comes something good with that aspect. So hopefully it will help. But now we have to wait.
Yes, now we have to wait. I can't tell you how many times somebody has sent this iPhone invite, or this invite, somebody accepted it on their iPhones and went all these places, and it just crashes your computer basically when you try to open it. It's poor Agent B, she's just shaking her head over there. We're making the Exchange admin cry. We're sorry, Agent B. We're sorry. We're sorry, Exchange got it.
I've had some really weird situations. The worst one that I ever experienced was the person that declined the meeting on an Android ended up taking over the meeting and canceling it for everybody.
Nice.
That's a bug that was fixed a couple of years ago, but just an example of how messy that can be. So I'm hoping that this, will help with some of that stuff that we face every day. So.
Well, it's good to see the platforms expanding, right? Like, that was the big thing around. Microsoft had, again, everybody's like, oh, they aren't going to play nicely. Then all of a sudden they have Office on iPads, which is probably one of the top downloaded and run productivity platforms. You've got the calendaring app, which is probably going to go through the roof, for the new email app as well, and it's
she's loud movements.
Poor Exchange goddess.
I know.
Another one that the capital E enterprise kids don't like, right, is the idea that that crazy, I don't like to see the fruit on the back of my corporate device, because there's a lot of things that you can't do with it that you can with other traditional enterprise platforms. Android's no better, in a lot of ways. There's a lot of stuff it can't do, but it's slowly getting better.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like totally like Microsoft. I'm like Office 365. That's my entire mail platform, my productivity platform, and it's all done off of here, an iPad, and a MacBook. So I'm kind of splitting the line between Microsoft and Apple.
Yep. I think we're running out of time, but I just wanted to mention VMware had a bunch of announcements this week, and I think there's an article on Teresa's website if you go to 24x7itconnection.com, right, Teresa?
Correct.
She posts a lot of great things about stuff in current topics in tech, so you should always read her website. It's very interesting. And so this week from VMware, we got our VMware integrated OpenStack, which we've beaten that horse a little bit tonight. vSphere 6, finally vVols, grab life by the vVols. I can't wait for that. And VMware has really been focused on the idea of hybrid cloud and kind of any device, any app. So this should be some interesting stuff. I believe the whole suite comes out in March, and we will see what becomes of it. I think everybody's really excited for the new version of eSphere.
Definitely.
Yeah, I agree. And I need to give both you and Pumala some credit too. You guys helped me do some of my writing, so
Yes.
you guys do a great job. Thank you.
Thank you. Our pleasure. And that's about all we have for tonight.
Oh,
Thank you all for joining us. One more.
That's right. That's my Columbo moment. Oh, there's one more thing, sir. So, like I said, there's a little surprise I wanted to have for people that wanted to learn, because I'm going to shamelessly plug a cool service that I use. That's right. These fine folks, Pluralsight. There you go. My good friends at Pluralsight have set me up with a stack of these fine free trials. So I know the vExpert community and the Cisco Champion community, we generally get free access to this resource, but if there's anybody who's watching who doesn't have that and they want an unfettered, free, unlimited 30-day trial, you can just tweet me at Disco Posse, or I'll even blindly give out my email. I'm eric@discoposse.com if you want one of these fine folks. I've got 25 of them to give away to. I'm going to do that, infomercial thing. If you call in the next 10 minutes, you will get, this. So I know that won't actually happen in 10 minutes, but I definitely want to help to, open up learning to more people, and we've got a lot of folks that we know that are great authors on that platform.
And Eric, you mentioned something important. vExpert. They announced the vExpert 2015 list today.
That's right.
So thank you, VMware, for running such an awesome program, and congratulations to everybody who's been a repeat vExpert and those first-time vExperts. Congratulations,
right.
vExperts.
And to you as well, Misty.
Thank you. Eric's vExpert.
You're on the list.
That's right.
Eric,
the three-peats.
Congratulations to you, too. Awesome.
All right. So thanks, everybody, for watching, and you know where to find us Thursday nights on Current Status. Bye.